Cybercab is coming. Robotaxi's coming first, but they're both coming in hot and they're both coming in Austin. And I happen to know someone who knows a thing or two about Austin. I got Josh West in the house, next to the Tennessee River. We're in Chattanooga. We're gonna talk all about Cybercab and Robotaxi and whether or not it's even gonna work. I'm Brian. Welcome to Futuraza. So yeah. Let's say June comes. Let's say we roll out in decent numbers, whether June, maybe even the end of the year, who cares? Doesn't matter. We know that Uber is going to be partnering with Waymo. We know that there are licenses already in place. Is Austin ready? Is Austin ready for this?
That's a very good question. So yes, let's start with Uber and Waymo. So Uber and Waymo have kicked off their, JV. I call it the JV. I was actually invited to Waymo's kickoff party, which was pretty cool. Lot of hype, a lot of excitement over that partnership. I did find out, however, that it is kind of area by area or city by city. It's not going to be happening in every single Waymo location, but it is happening in Austin. And so Austin's already kind of getting their feet wet with autonomous rideshare. And so to have Cybercab come on board, to me, is a very natural next step. I think that there's a lot of people that are super excited about it. Brian, I would defer to you as far as how you think the political climate will be with accepting a new Tesla product in Austin. I believe strongly that it will have a positive reception. Of course, you're gonna have a few outliers, but I think overall it's gonna be great. I'm personally super excited about it. The very first moment that I get, very first opportunity to get down there and get some coverage on that and get some rides in, I'll be there with bells on. But as far as excitement and anticipation, I think it's very high. But and I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but in a way, Waymo has kind of paved the way in a small way, just to get people who are not familiar with Tesla, they're not brand loyal, they really don't care, but just getting them the idea of, oh yeah, there goes one of those robot cars.
I think that's actually a really good point. People who would have been uncomfortable with it, maybe they haven't driven it, maybe they haven't ridden, maybe they don't know anyone who's ridden it, but those numbers will increase every day. It's like there was times when we didn't know anyone who had driven an electric car.
Right.
So in terms of the demand, I would point out that the 5% on the fringe of either political party believe that they speak for 50 to 80% of the population. And I'm going to tell you, 80% of the population is in the middle and doesn't care. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the politicization of any car, the middle 80 they just don't have time for it.
Well, they're living life.
I got stuff to do, man. So I think even if it was true that 50% of riders will never ride in a Tesla product, 50%, that's pretty good. You got 50% of the market. All you have to do is be at price parity to capture half.
Right.
Oh, that's great. And I don't believe it'll be at price parity.
No.
I believe it will be more affordable. It will cost less. So comparing the experience of a driverless vehicle to an Uber or a taxi, if they were which would you rather have?
Well, I did have the opportunity to ride the Waymo product up in SF in San Francisco, and that was a lot of fun. Shout out to the Kilowatts channel. We had a lot of fun when we scooted around in it. We played a couple of pranks on it, left the windows down, and it was pretty cool. As it's driving away, the windows are going up, so that was pretty neat.
Huh,
I had a lot. Yeah, I gotta say, it was. Once you get past sort of the novelty, and I think that's the important thing to remember, is that we're going to enter a world where autonomous rideshare is the norm. And not having a driver in the front seat is the norm, and we'll just get over oh my goodness, there's no driver, it's a robot car, blah, blah, blah. It'll just be like, let me just get to where I need to be. So I'm thinking in that sort of caliber is that we're already used to it, and I think people will very quickly forget that we used to have drivers. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I think there's gonna be a few holdouts, there's gonna be some people that are like, oh, I'm not so comfortable with it, but then I'm like, my counter to that is like, well, okay, so you're comfortable getting in a car with a complete stranger. I don't care if they're from a taxi company that's been on the road for 25 years. It really doesn't matter. The reality is you do not know that person. And while they may have credentials or whatever, you still don't know. How are you going to validate their credentials? You're just kind of going on faith. And so to me, it's like, well, I wouldn't have that much of a problem trusting in software that's programmed to do one thing and one thing very, very well.
And that's the big part of it is I know people who are afraid of strangers because they've had bad experiences in taxis or Ubers or whatever it may be where they felt uncomfortable. So just the comfort factor, the safety factor, and then you've got to factor in that even if it was the exact same price per mile, Robotaxi don't ask for a tip.
Yeah.
So all you have to do is not hurt the car and your rating remains 5 stars.
Right.
I've seen people say, well, I would still want a taxi because who's there to put my bags in the trunk? And I would ask, how did you get your bags to the curb?
Well, a lot of hotels have a doorman, and maybe we'll see a humanoid situation there down the road.
I think the concern over having someone load your bags is nonsense. I think it's only relevant to less than 1% of potential riders.
Mm-hmm.
Continue going with humans.
Well, I would add one thing really quick to that, and that is the fact that every Uber taxi driver knows their car very well. Every trunk opens differently. Sometimes they're harder to load. They've got that little leather thing. We don't want to damage the bumper, and there's all those other concerns. But when you have a purpose-built vehicle like Cybercab, and you have seen in the back of that thing, it is very easy to load. You have a very large open clamshell kind of cargo bay that doesn't have a big lip or anything you have to heave your luggage over. It's going to be very easy and intuitive to load that vehicle.
In your car, they have maximized trunk space by putting the liner around all of the equipment.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Cybercab, they've maximized it for it's straight. It is a box. It is a rectangle. There's nothing to get hung up on. It could not be easier. They could give you more cubic space, but they would do so at the risk of now you've got more liner to be damaged.
Right.
Things can get forgotten behind a crevice, whatever. So that's all valid.
Simplicity is really the key theme of that vehicle.
It really is. It really is. So now let's say at the June launch, they say, we're going to roll out 10 of our fleet as Cybercabs. But even if it's just all 3 and Y, what do you think the risk of vandalism is?
That's a good question. It's definitely not zero, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as what people are saying. Now, June is still a little ways away. We are just getting into April. We're at the tail end of March here, and we've got enough time. I think we could see some diffusion of some of the stuff that's going on. Obviously, there's some people that have been sort of bad actors and causing some of this trouble. And if they are dealt with properly through the legal system, I think that will be a deterrent against a lot of vandalism and things like that. But it's not to say it's going to be zero, because you're always going to have young punk kids that are going to do young punk things and be goofy around these vehicles. I mean, we've seen the Waymo vehicles get damaged, and for the sake of a viral video or something like that. I think Tesla's going into that understanding the risks involved. They're not oblivious to it, but they're also built a vehicle that I think is going to be pretty easy to maintain and clean, replace body panels, and really get these vehicles back on the road quickly.
I agree with all those points. And I would say that Waymos have been targeted as well in San Francisco, but we're talking fewer than 1 act of vandalism a month. Mm-hmm. It's more like 2 a year, and they're doing 1 million rides a month, 1 million paid rides a month. So your odds are like lottery low of damage. And especially when you realize the cars have nothing but cameras on them and it's nonstop recording. And I'm going to hide my face. Great, but there's another cab over there and it's got you too. So if these vandals are dealt with swiftly and you know that you're going to get caught, you're not going to do it.
Well, with these robotaxis, I mean, there's a very good potential that Tesla could be monitoring them in real time. That is certainly within their capability. I mean, we have the ability through Sentry mode to go in and view in real time what's going on around our vehicles. There's no reason, if they only have 10 or 20 cars on the road, they could easily have 10 or 20 operators that are watching that thing in real time, notifying the police as the vandalism is happening in real time, getting an officer or security guard or whoever out to that vehicle. So there's other options and kind of ideas that could be happening that we haven't thought about.
I hadn't even thought about that, but yeah, it would be, especially you could train it to recognize a potential situation to be on standby.
That's true.
And so let's say the Robotaxi network comes out. Are you going to put your car on the network?
my car will not be on the network.
Mhm.
For me, if I'm going to get a car on the network, I'm probably going to want to buy a cyber cab, purpose built. I'm not going to be emotionally attached to it. It's not my
Right.
personal vehicle. My kids aren't in it, whatever. It's just going to be a purely financial decision.
It's your work truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't need to love my work truck, my work van. I need it to do a job.
Mhm.
And that's my thought as well. I wouldn't put my Model Y on the network, in part because it's got a bunch of my stuff in it and I don't want to take it
Right.
out. And so, yeah, because then the question becomes, at what price, at what markup are you willing to, like, let's say you buy a cyber cab.
Mhm.
Let's forget what it costs, 25,000, 50,000, 100, I don't know, whatever it costs. First generation, I think it's going to probably be closer to 50 because they can.
Right.
If they sell them at all, which is a whole other topic. How much profit would you need, let's say per month, to justify it?
Well, it depends what the risk is, because it's all going to be risk reward based. So if you have very low risk, obviously you're not going to need to make as much profit on it. It still needs to make financial sense, but the reality is if it is extremely hands off, extremely low risk, and there's a decent amount of profit coming in, again, depending on rides, but just spitballing, maybe you're going to clear, a couple $1,000s a month, or even $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 a year on, if the vehicle is, let's say it is 50,000, you're on a 4-year payback roughly to get your capital back.
12% ROI or
It's not- ROE. Is it? Yeah. So it's not the end of the world. That's not ideal. Obviously, I think that around the $2,000 a month, I think would make more sense. 2-year, capital return. And again, remembering that cyber cab's not worth nothing at the end of that 2 or 4 years either.
Right. At 50,000, it'd be 24%. I mean, that is a good deal. So if you're retired, do you have $100,000 that you could pull out to buy these to purchase a $24,000 income? And that's only at $1,000 a month profit.
It's not terrible.
$30 a day, can you do it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you're not pulling $30 a day, what are you doing? So I think and that's at 50 grand, let alone at 25. Now you got 4 of them. That's why I think Tesla's going to be unlikely to do it. And I could see a lot of different. One example someone came up with yesterday was Kelly was saying, dialysis centers. They don't want it. They don't want the people driving after dialysis. They can get dizzy. They can crash. Just having dialysis vehicles to just for the center themselves. Yeah. They could smart schedule.
Even dentistry. Same thing. You get gas. They don't want you to drive or whatever.
Yeah. I think all of that would work.
Yeah.
Guys in the comments, what do we miss? What do we misunderstand? Leave it, I demand, for a limited time only. And I apologize, but this emergency order comments are mandatory. So if you made it this far, you are required to leave one. Josh West 24/7, all his links are in the description. He does some fantastic work and some terrible work, but I'll talk to him about that later. He knows what he's done. Everybody else, like, comment, subscribe, do what you do, and stay tuned, stay juicy, and I cannot wait to hear from you clever robots when you join us at one of these amazing events. Next one with Josh I'm going to be at is in June in Muskegon.
Yes.
Check out the Tesla Owners of Michigan to find more information on that.